On May 10, 1945, off Hålogalandsøy Island, Norway, Commander Oberleutnant Heinz Schaeffer watched 16 of his men climb into rubber dinghies. These were the married men, choosing to return to their families after Germany's surrender, which had occurred 5 days earlier. 32 men, however, chose to stay, volunteering for a desperate, unprecedented voyage. They were about to attempt the impossible, a 7,644 nautical mile escape to Argentina, hunted by every Allied force in the Atlantic. Schaeffer, only 24 years old, had taken command of U-977 in December 1945. A Type VIIC submarine, it had been relegated to training, its pressure hull compromised, and its batteries only 70% efficient after being rammed 3 times. Germany had surrendered on May 8, 1945, with Admiral Karl Dönitz ordering every U-boat at sea to surface and proceed to the nearest Allied port. By May 10th, 156 U-boats had already complied, but Schaeffer remembered the propaganda broadcasts. Joseph Goebbels had claimed the Morgenthau Plan would turn Germany into a goat pasture and enslave and sterilize every German male. Schaeffer also recalled his father's 2 years in a French prison camp after World War I, enduring starvation and forced labor. With the Allies discovering the horrors of Bergen-Belsen and Dachau, he feared a far worse fate for his crew. U-977 had left Kristiansand on May 2nd for what was supposed to be a suicide mission, an attack on British shipping in the heavily defended Southampton harbor. Fortunately, Schaeffer never had to attempt it. On May 5th, Dönitz ordered a ceasefire. 3 days later, Schaeffer received the surrender order. Gathering his crew, mostly boys, aged 18 and 19, he presented 3 options: surrender to the British, seek internment in neutral Spain, or attempt a voyage to Argentina. Argentina, technically neutral and home to a large German community of almost 300,000, offered the slim hope of internment rather than imprisonment. The majority voted for Argentina. On May 10th, after the married men departed, U-977 submerged near Hålogalandsøy Island with 32 men and headed west into the North Atlantic. The first challenge was fuel. While a full tank allowed for about 9,000 nautical miles on the surface, submerged running with the snorkel increased fuel consumption by 40% due to exhaust back pressure. The snorkel, a Dutch invention adapted by the Germans, allowed the diesel engines to breathe underwater, but only in calm seas. In rough weather, the float valve would close, causing the engines to suck air from the submarine, creating a vacuum that could rupture eardrums, a phenomenon the crew called snorkel torture. The snorkel also limited speed to 6 knots, meaning the 7,644-mile journey would take at least 45 days, even if they could run continuously. The second and greater challenge was the Allies. They had developed advanced anti-submarine technologies, radar that could spot a snorkel head from 10 miles away, magnetic anomaly detectors, and sonobuoys. The life expectancy of a U-boat on patrol was less than 2 missions, and 75% of all U-boat personnel had died during the war, the highest casualty rate of any service branch. Schaeffer was leading his men into a killing field after the war was over, where any Allied vessel would assume they were war criminals and attack without warning. The third challenge were the men themselves. Trapped in a 220-foot-long steel tube, the air was thick with diesel fumes and the smell of unwashed men. By the second week, the snorkel valve began sticking, causing partial vacuums that made men collapse and their ears bleed. By the third week, the constant motion at snorkel depth caused nausea and sleeplessness. A 17-year-old sailor from Munich began showing signs of U-boat psychosis, counting rivets and refusing to eat. Schaeffer had to maintain discipline based solely on personal loyalty and the hope of a new life. They were in the most dangerous waters, hearing warships pass constantly overhead. On May 23rd, a large convoy passed directly above them, causing the hull to groan, but they were not detected. By the fourth week, the stench of human waste and diesel was overwhelming, and fresh water was rationed to 1 cup per man per day. Men developed rashes and infections, which the medic treated with engine grease, the only antiseptic left. Food was canned bread and meat, and though the cook tried to boost morale with fancy names like Atlantic stew, it was all the same gray sauce. On June 1st, Schaeffer was forced to surface in heavy fog to repair the snorkel head. It was the first time they had fully surfaced in 2 weeks. Crewmen went topside, vomiting from the pressure change, but breathing fresh air and feeling rain on their faces. The engineers patched a cracked weld with metal strips cut from food cans and tar. Passing west of the Azores on June 12th marked a milestone. They were out of the primary Allied patrol zones. Schaeffer allowed a small celebration of canned peaches and hidden beer. But as they moved south, temperatures inside the submarine soared, reaching 95 degrees Fahrenheit and 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the engine room. Men passed out from heat exhaustion, and humidity caused mold and electrical shorts. The first riddle crisis hit on June 20th, when the port diesel engine seized due to salt water leakage. With no spare parts, they were forced to continue on one engine, increasing their fuel consumption. Schaeffer calculated that reaching Argentina would be very close. Morale collapsed. If the remaining engine failed, they would die. The second engine began overheating on July 4th. The cooling water intake was blocked by seaweed. The chief engineer volunteered for an impossible task: to clear the grate from outside the hull 40 feet underwater using the escape hatch. He nearly drowned on his final attempt, but was revived. The engine was saved. On July 14th, after 66 days submerged, Schaeffer made the drastic decision to surface in daylight. The crew was dying, 2 men in comas from heat exhaustion, and 1 sailor had attempted suicide. They stayed surfaced for 6 hours, gambling that they were in a gap between air patrol zones. Later that day, they anchored off Branco Island in the Cape Verde, a neutral Portuguese territory. For 4 precious hours, the crew went swimming and sang on deck, a desperate, joyful return to humanity for men living like rats. The American interrogation report would later note, the crew went swimming and also sang for a while on deck. Changing tactics, Schaeffer began running on the surface at night, submerging only during the day. The crew's condition could not survive another month underwater. On July 23rd, they crossed the equator. They were in the South Atlantic, where Allied patrols were lighter, but they were hunted by Brazilian naval forces, which had been at war with Germany since 1942. Fuel became critical. By August 10th, only 2 tons of fuel remained, enough for perhaps 3 days. Schaeffer reduced speed to 3 knots. On August 17, 1945, at 7:30 a.m., U-977 entered Mar del Plata Harbor, Argentina. The voyage had taken 107 days and covered 7,644 nautical miles. The Argentine naval officer who came aboard found 32 walking skeletons, men whose clothes were rotting and who hadn't bathed in 3 months. Schaeffer, having lost 40 pounds, handed over his vessel and collapsed. The arrival caused an international sensation, immediately sparking rumors of Nazi gold, high-ranking Nazis, or even Adolf Hitler himself being aboard. Under intense pressure, the crew was transferred to American custody and flown to Washington for interrogation. Their logs, meticulously kept, proved the direct route from Norway and showed their torpedoes were accounted for, refuting any claims of attacks after the ceasefire. The American Office of Naval Intelligence found no evidence of Nazi gold or passengers and concluded the crew had fled to avoid Soviet captivity. The Brazilian Navy, however, accused U-977 of sinking the cruiser Bahia, which exploded and sank on July 4, 1945, killing 336 men. Investigation later proved the submarine was 600 miles away, dealing with its engine crisis, and the Bahia was lost to an accidental ammunition explosion. In 1947, Schaeffer was released and returned to a Germany in ruins. In 1952, he published his book, U-977, 66 Days Underwater, which became an international bestseller but only fueled more conspiracy theories. He moved to Argentina permanently in 1953, where he married and became a businessman. To the persistent questions, he would simply say, "We were young men who didn't want to die in a prison camp. That's all. Nothing more." The real story, though, was the extraordinary achievement of keeping 32 men alive in a damaged submarine. Modern computer simulations have consistently shown that U-977 should have run out of fuel 1,000 miles from Argentina or succumbed to catastrophic mechanical failure. The Argentine Navy's 1991 analysis concluded the voyage was possible only through extraordinary seamanship and luck. The survival of the crew depended not just on technical skill, but on psychological endurance, maintaining routine and discipline even after their government had surrendered. Against every calculation, U-977 made it. It was a testament to a combination of skill, luck, and sheer refusal to give up. The voyage is studied in naval academies today, an example of what desperate men in desperate circumstances can achieve. Heinz Schaeffer died in Berlin in 1979. His gravestone bears a simple inscription, Heinz Schaeffer, 1921 to 1979. Commander, U-977. No mention of the disputed 66 days submerged or the impossible escape. Just the name and the number of a submarine that refused to surrender.